Dear students, welcome to the lecture on Emergence of Political Philosophy. Today, you will get to learn about the study of political philosophy, the meaning of enlightenment, emergence of political philosophy. To begin with, political philosophy is an important part of the philosophy. It is a combination of theoretical knowledge of political life. The purpose of political philosophy is to speak of political life as theoretical knowledge based on values. Political philosophy does not only teach us to question politics, it enriches us with its wealth of knowledge and helps us to find answers to those questions. The Western world encompasses the societies of ancient Greece and Romans, then Europe, and includes the Americas. Modern philosophy refers to Western philosophy of the late 16th through early 20th century and is today's philosophy. The modern philosophy focuses on gaining knowledge, scientific issues through inquiry, rational logic, and skepticism and individualism. Here the modern philosophy was a transition from theological thought. There were several themes we look in through the works of modern philosophers like consent, individual rights, historical progress, and epistemology. Before modernity, government legitimacy was based on the belief in divine rights of the king, while consent of the governed was totally ignored. Individual rights are to be respected by even the rulers, where the exploration of new theories were leading to historical progress. In terms of epistemology, the importance was given to rationality and power of individual's mind to make sense of the world. Here, modernity is associated with individualism, liberalism, social contract, democracy, secularization, and equality. Transitioning from religious and spiritual perspective, scientific and materialistic way of life became the basis of modernity. In addition to that, urbanization, rise of nation states and bureaucracy, deepening of communication and financial exchanges are added features of modernity. The study of modernity is extended from enlightenment, rationality and the idea of modernity with the ideas of social contract traditions, rights of women, Mill and his ideas on liberty and individualism, suffrage and the principle of utility. The contemporary philosophy deals with two philosophical approaches to divide thinking among professionals. Analytical philosophy focuses on analysis of knowledge and the principles of formal logical thinking. The analytical philosophy focuses on questions, making meaning and thinking related to the world. Continental philosophy focuses on themes in society like history, politics, and freedom. Continental philosophy focuses on the synthesis of social issues within these themes. The movements of continental philosophy include existentialism, Marxism, and post-structuralism. Let us discuss about the Enlightenment. Enlightenment began in West European countries like England, France, and Germany, spread across Europe. Later it travelled to North and South America, Asia, and Africa. In Western Europe, political thinkers, philosophers, scientists and social scientists used scientific reason to seek answers in various fields including politics. Absolute monarchs who had a lot of wealth and military power ruled most of the European countries in 17th and 18th centuries. They ruled on the basis of divine rights doctrine, controlled religious authorities and dissent against them was strictly punished. Enlightenment also challenged the hierarchical view of all life as given by great chain of being. All types of matter and life was organized in a hierarchical structure according to great chain of being. God is at the top of the chain, followed by angels and humans, followed by animals and plants. Influenced by Plato and Aristotle, the great chain of being justified the claim that everything was created and determined by God. Enlightenment, which is also called the age of reason, probably started in 18th century in Europe with new ways of thinking, gave a new dimension of the way the knowledge to be understood and the organization of the state and society based on that knowledge. Among the prominent contributions on enlightenment, the German philosopher Immanuel Kant's article "What is Enlightenment?" published in 1784 was considered as the prominent contribution. He mentioned in Latin sapere aude, meaning one should have the courage to use our own understanding and knowledge, which is understood as the motto of enlightenment. Thus, Kant said, "Dare to know by using the self-knowledge." In enlightenment, there are two diverging strands called radical and moderate. The characteristics of the enlightenment period are scientific temper and reason, where the importance was given to rationality and empiricism to achieve human progress. Skepticism towards traditional authority in politics and religion, where claims about knowledge were to be doubted. Here, skepticism could also be seen in the philosophy of ancient Greece and Ajnana school of philosophy in ancient India. Human progress here, the scientific discoveries instilled confidence among different sections of people that humans were capable of understanding the working of universe and could control environmental conditions. The optimistic belief of enlightenment was that the goodness and reason in human beings would create a prosperous, peaceful society and perfect people. Local variations as one of the characteristics had encouragement to field of arts and science and economic liberalism, empiricism, a theory of knowledge which says all concepts and understanding is based on experience. It emphasized evidence, particularly gathered through scientific methods and experiments. Likewise, cosmopolitanism, with a belief that human beings across the world form a single community. One of the main reasons impacted by enlightenment was politics. Political modernization came to the West due to enlightenment, as institutions of liberal democracy, and values like freedom were propagated. Enlightenment plays an important role in checking the power of organized religion and prevented yet another cycle of religious and intolerant wars in Europe. Religious reformation, scientific revolution and emergence of concept of sovereignty after 30 years of war in Europe led to the rise of enlightenment. Opposition to absolute monarchy, liberty and individual rights, separation of powers, free market capitalism and equality are some of the influential ideas of enlightenment. Dear students, now let us learn about the emergence of the modern political philosophy. The first modern political scientist was the Italian writer Niccolo Machiavelli. Machiavelli's political philosophy, which completed the secularization of politics begun by Marsilius, was based on reason rather than religion. Machiavelli believed that Italy could be unified and its foreign occupiers expelled only by ruthless and single-minded princes who rejected any moral constraints on their power. Machiavelli introduced the modern idea of power, how to get it and how to use it as the crux of politics, a viewpoint shared by today's international relations realists, rational choice theorists and others. Machiavelli thus ranks alongside Aristotle as a founder of political science. The English philosopher Thomas Hobbes also placed power at the center of his political analysis. In his works on Leviathan, the matter, form and power of a commonwealth, ecclesiastical and civil, written at the end of English civil wars, Hobbes outlined on how to live in an anarchic state of nature. He dealt with a hypothetical agreement between citizens and their rulers by entering into a social contract, by submitting the rights to a sovereign authority, who is a monarch. That in fact defines the rights and duties of each. Next is John Locke, who also witnessed the turmoil of an English civil war, the Glorious Revolution. Two treatises on civil government, his influential work, discussed that people form governments through a social contract to preserve their inalienable natural rights to life, liberty and property. And here the government that fails to secure the natural rights of its citizens may properly be overthrown. Locke's views were a powerful force in the intellectual life of 18th century colonial America and constituted the philosophical basis of the American Declaration of Independence. Considering Hobbes as a conservative of the contractualists and Locke as a liberal, the French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau was a radical. Rousseau's The Social Contract constructs a civil society in which the separate wills of individuals are combined to govern as the general will of all, overriding the individual's will. Further, a pragmatic French philosopher, Montesquieu, he contributed to modern comparative politics with his The Spirit of Laws. His work based on the separation and balance of power between parliament and the monarchy, a principle later embraced by the framers of the Constitution of the United States. He also produced an innovative analysis of governance that assigned to each form of government with a principle. For example, republics are based on virtue, monarchies on honor, and despotisms on fear. His analysis gave an important message that a country's form of government is determined not by the locus of the political power, but by how the government enacts public policy. Moving further to the Scottish economist and philosopher Adam Smith, as is considered as the founder of classical economic liberalism. His work on an inquiry into the nature and causes of the wealth of nations argued that the role of state should be restricted primarily to enforcing contracts in a free market. In contrast, the classical conservatism of the English parliamentarian Edmund Burke maintained that established values and institutions were essential elements of all societies, and that revolutions that sought to destroy such values leading to tyranny. Burke gave an important psychological or cultural insight that political systems are living organisms that grow over centuries and that depend on a sense of legitimacy that is gradually built up among their subjects. The early development of political science was so influenced by law. The French philosopher Jean Bodin articulated a theory of sovereignty that viewed the state as the modern state was first developing, provided a justification of the legitimacy of national governments, one fiercely defended to this day. Bodin's notion of sovereignty, useful for expressing the legitimacy and equality of states. The contemporary political science traces its roots primarily to the 19th century. This is the period when the rapid growth of natural sciences stimulated enthusiasm for the creation of a new social science. In a nutshell, political philosophy can be defined as philosophical reflection on how best to arrange our collective life, our political institutions and our social practices, such as our economic system and our pattern of family life. Political philosophers seek to establish basic principles that justify a particular form of state, show that individuals have certain inalienable rights, or tell us how society's material resources should be shared among its members. This involves analyzing and interpreting ideas like freedom, justice, authority and democracy, and then applying them in a critical way to the social and political institutions that currently exist. Some political philosophers have tried primarily to justify the prevailing arrangements of their society. Others have painted pictures of an ideal state or an ideal social world that is very different from anything we have so far experienced. In the medieval Europe, for instance, the proper relationship between church and state became a central issue in political philosophy. In the early modern period, the main argument was between defenders of absolutism and those who sought to justify a limited constitutional state. In the 19th century, the social question, the question of how an industrial society should organize its economy and its welfare system came to the fore. When we study the history of political philosophy, therefore, we find that alongside some perennial questions like how can one person ever justifiably claim the authority to govern another person? And one question that immediately arises is whether the principles that political philosophers establish are to be regarded as having universal validity or whether they should be seen as expressing the assumptions and the values of a particular political community. This question about the scope and status of political philosophy has been fiercely debated in recent years. In order to justify a set of collective arrangements, a political philosophy must say something about the nature of human beings, about their needs, their capacities, about whether they are mainly selfish or mainly altruistic and so forth. But can we discover common traits in human beings everywhere, or are people's characters predominantly shaped by the particular culture they belong to? Dear students, to conclude the lecture on emergence of political philosophy. Political philosophy has been practiced for as long as human beings have regarded their collective arrangements not as immutable and part of the natural order, but as potentially open to change and therefore as standing in need of philosophical justification. It can be found in many different cultures and has taken a wide variety of forms. There are two reasons for this diversity. First, the methods and approaches used by political philosophers reflect the general philosophical tendencies of their epoch. Developments in epistemology and ethics, for instance, alter the assumptions on which political philosophy can proceed. But second, the political philosopher's agenda is largely set by the pressing political issues of the day. Dear students, I hope you learned the emergence of political philosophy and continue to learn more. Thank you.